July 1993. Clearwater, Florida. The ocean glittered under the late afternoon sun. Tourists packed the boardwalk, and the air smelled of sunscreen and salt. It was the kind of perfect summer day people never forget, except for one family who would spend the next 30 years trying to. At 5:12 p.m., Rachel Porter, 23, parked her white Honda Civic near Sand Key Beach and called her best friend. "I'll only be an hour," she said. "Then we'll grab dinner." It was the last phone call she ever made. When Rachel didn't show up that night, her friend assumed she'd stayed out watching the sunset. By morning, when her car was still in the same spot, unlocked with her sandals in the front seat, Clearwater police declared her missing. Detective Tom Keller, then 29, was assigned to the case. The first thing he noticed was how ordinary it all looked. No signs of a struggle, no footprints leading from the sand to the water, no witnesses who saw her leave. "It's like she just walked into the air," Keller told the press. Rachel was a nursing student, quiet, reliable, with no enemies and no debts. Her parents had driven from Orlando that morning, standing by the beach as helicopters circled overhead. Her mother clutched Rachel's towel like it was a lifeline. She wouldn't go swimming alone. She kept saying she was afraid of the ocean at night. Keller built the case from fragments. Security footage from a nearby marina showed Rachel walking toward the pier around 5:40 p.m., talking to someone just out of frame. The image was grainy, 1993 analog quality, but there was a man's shadow visible beside her. Witnesses remembered seeing a man matching that silhouette earlier in the day. Tall, sunburned, wearing a red ball cap. One witness said he drove a brown Chevy Blazer with out-of-state plates. Keller issued a BOLO, but nothing surfaced. The car, the man, and Rachel were all gone. Over the next 2 weeks, search teams scoured every inch of Sand Key. Divers combed the waters offshore. Dogs swept the dunes, and volunteers lined the coast in human chains. They found nothing. No purse. No body. No answers. By late August, the case began to fade from headlines. Detectives leaned toward the theory of accidental drowning, a convenient conclusion that Keller refused to accept. "People don't drown with their car unlocked and keys on the dash," he told his captain. But with no physical evidence, his protests meant little. Still, Keller didn't let go. He kept Rachel's file on his desk through promotions, through marriages and divorces, through hurricanes and budget cuts. Every few years, he reopened it, hoping for something new. Nothing came. Then, in September 2023, 3 decades later, everything changed. A tropical storm had rolled through the Gulf, tearing apart parts of the old Clearwater coastline. After the storm passed, a retired fisherman named Bill Carver was walking along a newly exposed stretch of beach when he saw something sticking out of the sand near the collapsed pier, a piece of rusted metal and a faded plastic badge. It was a marina parking permit, dated July 1993. The name printed on it, Rachel Porter. Police cordoned off the area immediately. The tide had unearthed a buried section of the old pier's foundation, an area that had been sealed off since a collapse in 1994. Beneath the concrete, investigators found what Keller had been searching for his entire career: skeletal remains, entangled in fragments of clothing and metal wiring. Next to the bones, half buried in sand, was a gold locket engraved with the initials RP. DNA confirmed what Keller already knew before the results came back. It was Rachel. The medical examiner determined cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. When news broke, Clearwater's calm facade shattered. Local media flooded the boardwalk. Headlines screamed, "1993 beach mystery finally solved. Remains identified as missing student." For Keller, now 59 and nearing retirement, the discovery reignited more than just a case. It reopened 3 decades of guilt. He'd promised Rachel's mother he wouldn't stop until he found her. Now he had, but it wasn't enough. He wanted the man in the red cap. ColdCase technicians digitized the old 1993 evidence logs, including Keller's original notes and photos. One detail stood out. The brown Chevy Blazer, with out-of-state plates, had been ticketed near the pier the same day Rachel vanished. The citation was written at 5:38 p.m., just 2 minutes before Rachel was last seen. The license plate number had been smudged, unreadable at the time, but modern enhancement software restored it. Oregon, 7RZ104. That plate traced back to Ronald Pierce, a 32-year-old construction contractor who'd been working in Clearwater on a temporary project that summer. Pierce had left Florida a week after Rachel disappeared and was never questioned. His name appeared nowhere in the 1993 investigation. Keller stared at the file, stunned. "We had him," he muttered. "He was right there." When detectives tracked Pierce down in 2023, he was living in Eugene, Oregon, retired, divorced, and volunteering at a local boating club. He'd aged, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, hadn't changed. When shown a photo of Rachel, he looked at it for a long moment before setting it down. "That was a long time ago," he said. Investigators obtained a DNA sample under a consent warrant. The results came back 2 weeks later. Pierce's DNA was a partial match to foreign material found beneath Rachel's fingernails. It wasn't definitive, but close enough. Keller flew to Oregon personally. When he entered the interrogation room, he didn't bring files or photographs, just Rachel's locket in an evidence bag. He set it on the table and said, "You remember her, don't you?" Pierce smiled faintly. "You've been chasing ghosts, detective. The ocean takes what it wants." Keller leaned in. Except this time, it gave her back. Pierce didn't speak again. When the arrest was made, news outlets across the country picked up the story. Florida cold case solved after 30 years. DNA breakthrough leads to arrest. But inside the Clearwater PD, Keller wasn't celebrating. Something about Pierce's silence bothered him. The DNA match wasn't full, only partial. Someone else had been there. He revisited the 1993 logs again, scanning every detail of the Marina report. That's when he saw it. A name scribbled next to the original parking ticket in blue ink. Officer M. Dugan. Officer Matthew Dugan had written the citation the day Rachel disappeared. Dugan had also been Keller's partner back then. He died in 2012, ruled a suicide. But what Keller discovered next would change everything. In 2011, a year before his death, Dugan had checked a box of personal items into police evidence storage under a sealed order marked "Private, Do Not Destroy." Inside was a single cassette tape labeled Pier 93. When Keller played it in the evidence lab, his hands shook. The recording was faint, full of static, but one voice came through clearly. Rachel's, terrified, pleading. "You said I could trust you. Why are you doing this?" And then a man's voice, calm. Familiar. "You shouldn't have come here alone, Rachel." It wasn't Ronald Pierce. It was Officer Matthew Dugan. The tape ended with the sound of waves and a dull, heavy impact. Keller turned off the recorder, his heart pounding. 3 decades later, he was staring at the truth and realizing he'd been working beside Rachel's killer the entire time. Detective Tom Keller sat alone in the evidence lab as the tape hissed to an end. The silence that followed was deafening. For 30 years, he had imagined what Rachel Porter's last moments might have sounded like. Now he wished he never knew. The voice on the tape was unmistakable. Officer Matthew Dugan, Keller's old partner, the man he trusted more than anyone on the force back in '93. They'd spent endless nights patrolling Clearwater's coast, swapping stories over diner coffee. Keller remembered how Dugan used to joke that he knew every shadow on that beach. Now those words sounded like a confession. The The next morning, Keller brought the recording to Captain Reynolds, the current head of the Clearwater Police Department. Reynolds listened without saying a word. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. "We'll reopen the internal case file," he said. "But you realize what this means. Tom, Dugan's been dead 12 years. You can't prosecute a corpse." Keller shook his head. "Then I'll find who helped him. Someone else was there that night. That tape didn't just appear in storage on its own." Reynolds nodded reluctantly. "Do it quietly. The department doesn't need a scandal. Not again." By the afternoon, Keller was digging through archives that hadn't been touched in decades. Yellowed reports, water-stained maps, brittle photographs from the marina crime scene. He found Dugan's personnel file buried under a stack of retired officers' records. It painted a picture of a man who'd been both admired and feared. In 1993, Dugan had been a rising star, decorated twice for bravery, popular with superiors, and known for bending rules to get results. But the deeper Keller looked, the more cracks appeared. 2 complaints from female officers about inappropriate conduct, a bar fight off duty that mysteriously vanished from his record, and 1 line that made Keller's blood run cold: "Temporary assignment, Marina Patrol, June, July 1993. The exact months of Rachel Porter's disappearance. Keller drove to the marina that evening. The boardwalk had changed, rebuilt after hurricanes, commercialized by decades of tourism. But the old pier, or what was left of it, was still there, a decaying skeleton of concrete and rust jutting into the Gulf. He walked the weathered boards until he reached the edge where the storm had unearthed Rachel's remains. The ocean below was calm, deceptively peaceful. He pictured Dugan standing there that night, the red and blue lights flashing faintly on the horizon, Rachel pleading for her life, the waves swallowing the sound. His phone buzzed. It was the forensics unit. "Detective, you'll want to see this," the technician said. "We re-examined the fibers found on Rachel's clothing. There's a second DNA profile. It's not Dugan's and not Ronald Pierce's either." "Whose is it?" "We're running it now, but the preliminary match is close to a relative of Dugan's." Keller froze. "Relative?" "Yes, possibly a sibling, maybe a son. But Dugan never had kids, at least not officially." The next day, Keller visited Dugan's widow, Elaine Dugan, who still lived in the same modest house north of Gulf to Bay Boulevard. The front porch sagged, the paint long faded, but the flower beds were immaculate, just like she'd always kept them when Keller used to visit. Elaine answered the door with tired eyes. "I figured someone would come eventually," she said, before Keller could speak. "It's about Matthew, isn't it?" Keller nodded. "I found something, a tape, from the night Rachel Porter disappeared." And she closed her eyes. "I was hoping that would stay buried." They sat in the living room, the same room where Dugan used to clean his service weapon, watching old reruns on a flickering TV. Elaine's hands trembled as she poured coffee. "You think I didn't know what he was capable of," she said. "I lived in fear of him for 20 years. He had a temper, but that girl, Rachel, I didn't know." Keller leaned forward. "Then who helped him, Elaine?" "Someone else's DNA was found with hers." Her eyes darted to a framed photo on the mantel, a young man in a Clearwater PD cadet uniform. Keller followed her gaze. "My nephew," she whispered. "Jason. Matthew raised him after his sister died. Always said he was giving him a better life." Keller stared at the photo. Jason Dugan, 21 years old, eager smile, rookie badge gleaming. The same Jason who now worked as a detective in the same department. Keller drove back to the station, heart pounding. Jason had joined the force in 2019, charming, efficient, a golden boy like his uncle before him. He'd even volunteered to assist Keller when the case reopened last month. The more Keller thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces fit. Jason had been at every briefing, every search site, every evidence review. He was always one step ahead, too eager, too informed. That night, Keller pulled Jason's personnel records. His DNA sample from the academy entrance exam was on file. The comparison took only minutes. The result, 99.4% match to the secondary DNA. Keller didn't call for backup. He went straight to Jason's apartment on the east side of town. The lights were on. Through the blinds, Keller saw him sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of bourbon beside a framed photo of Matthew Dugan in uniform. Jason looked up as Keller entered. "I figured you'd figure it out," he said quietly. "You always do." "Why, Jason?" Keller asked. "Why carry your uncle's secret?" Jason stared at the glass in his hand. "He told me she attacked him, said she was blackmailing him for something she saw at the marina. I didn't believe him at first, but when I was 15, he took me out there, showed me where he hid her, said it was our secret, said it would ruin the family if I ever told." Keller's voice hardened. "So you helped him bury her?" Jason nodded, tears filling his eyes. "I didn't kill her, but I helped move her. He made me, and I've been living with it ever since." Keller pulled out his cuffs. "You know what has to happen now." Jason didn't resist. He stood, hands trembling. "You were his friend," he said. "You should have seen it. You should have stopped him." Keller said nothing. He led Jason outside, the humid air thick with salt and regret. At headquarters, Jason gave a full confession on tape. He described how his uncle had been secretly extorting money from marina owners in exchange for ignoring illegal operations. Rachel, working part-time at a nearby bait shop, had discovered it and threatened to expose him. On July 10, 1993, she confronted him at the pier. Dugan snapped, striking her with his flashlight. When he realized she was dead, he called Jason, then 15, to help hide the body under the pier construction site. They sealed her remains with scrap metal and concrete, assuming the tides would keep the secret forever. For 30 years, it did. Jason had lived with the guilt, even joining the department in a twisted attempt at atonement. But when the storm unearthed Rachel's remains, he knew the past was coming for him. "I couldn't stop it," he said in his statement. "I thought maybe if I helped find her, it would make up for what I did. But every night, I saw her face." The next morning, Keller stood on the beach as reporters swarmed the scene. Headlines already blared. "Florida cold case cracked. Nephew confesses to helping cop hide murder victim." But behind the cameras, Keller wasn't celebrating. He stared at the endless horizon, the waves rolling in and out, erasing footprints as quickly as they appeared. For 30 years, he'd thought the ocean had taken Rachel Porter. Now he knew it was the people sworn to protect her. He removed his badge, weighing it in his palm. It felt heavier than ever. "Justice," he whispered, "comes late, but it comes." He dropped the badge into the sand, watching as the tide crept closer, and for the first time in decades, turned his back on the sea. Part 3. The courtroom in Clearwater was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens poised, cameras rolling as Jason Dugan took the stand. It had been 3 months since his arrest. The media had dubbed it the beachside betrayal. The headlines alone shattered what was left of Clearwater PD's reputation. But for Detective Tom Keller, this wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about finishing what he started 30 years ago. Jason sat stiffly in the witness box, his voice quiet but steady as he recounted that night in 1993. "He called me around midnight," he said, eyes downcast, said he'd made a mistake. "When I got to the marina, she was already gone. He said we had to hide her. I was 15. I didn't know what to do." The courtroom listened in stunned silence. The prosecutor stepped forward. "And by he, you mean your uncle, Officer Matthew Dugan?" Jason nodded. "Yes, sir." "What did he tell you to do with the body?" Jason's jaw tightened. "He made me carry her under the pier, said no one would ever look there. Once the new concrete was poured, I helped him seal it. He told me if I ever said a word, I'd go to prison too." From the gallery, Keller watched every twitch, every word. The young detective who once stood beside him at briefings now looked hollowed out, a man half broken by secrets he was never meant to keep. The defense tried to argue coercion, Jason's age, his fear, the psychological manipulation from his uncle. But the jury saw through it. They saw the man who'd chosen silence for 30 years while Rachel Porter's parents died without answers. When the verdict was read, guilty of accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, Jason didn't react. He just looked toward Keller, eyes full of something that wasn't anger, but relief. Like a weight had finally been lifted. As deputies led him away, he whispered, "Tell her family I'm sorry." Keller didn't answer. He simply nodded. 2 weeks later, the department called a press conference. Cameras crowded the front of the Clearwater PD headquarters, the same building where Keller had spent nearly 4 decades chasing ghosts. The chief addressed the crowd, outlining reforms, promising transparency, and naming Keller as the man whose persistence brought light to our darkest chapter. Keller stood behind him, expression unreadable. When the microphones turned toward him, he spoke only one sentence. "Justice delayed is still justice earned." Then he walked away. That night, Keller returned to the marina one last time. The reconstruction crews had already begun demolishing the remnants of the old pier. A small memorial stood nearby. Flowers, candles, and a framed photo of Rachel smiling in her nursing uniform. Someone had written on a note card, "You're home now, Rachel." Keller knelt beside it, setting down a silver badge. His badge, polished to a dull shine. "I'm done," he murmured. But as he stood to leave, a voice called from behind. "Detective Keller?" It was a woman in her late 40s, dark hair pulled into a braid. She introduced herself as Megan Porter, Rachel's cousin. "My aunt always said you'd find her," she said softly. "She died believing that." Keller's throat tightened. "I wish I'd found her sooner." Megan shook her head. "No, you found the truth. That's what matters." They stood in silence as the tide crept in, the waves whispering against the sand. For the first time in decades, Keller didn't feel haunted, just tired. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the Dugan case spread far beyond Clearwater. State investigators reopened several cold cases from the early 90s. Unsolved assaults, missing, pointing, etc. Found the photo taken in 1993. Rachel smiling beside her car, hair windblown, eyes bright with life. He took a deep breath, then signed his name on the closing report. Case status solved. A knock sounded at the door. Captain Reynolds leaned in. "You sure you're ready to walk away?" Keller smiled faintly. "I've been ready for 30 years. Reynolds hesitated. "You know, the Academy's naming their new cold case program after you. The Keller Initiative. You deserve it." Keller chuckled. "I just hope it means someone else won't wait this long for answers." He stood, slipped on his jacket, and walked out, not looking back. 3 months later, Keller sat on a park bench overlooking Clearwater Beach. He watched the sunset paint the water gold, the same way it had the night Rachel vanished. He thought about all the names, all the faces that had passed through his hands, most forgotten, some still unsolved. He wasn't haunted anymore, just grateful. As the last light faded, a gull landed nearby, its reflection flickering on the waves. Keller smiled. "You made it home, Rachel," he whispered. He stood, hands in his pockets, and walked toward the fading horizon.